Thank you so much for joining us again, Kushi.
Hello, hello. Hi, Sharon. Thank you so much. Hey, welcome everybody. Namaste, friends. Good to be with you again. I hope you are enjoying yourselves, enjoying the series. And this week we are almost on the home stretch, right? We are in the fifth week of yoga mythology, right? So let's start with a little invocation, please. So just relax your body, relax your breathing. All of the invocations that we do are also rooted in your breath, right? So when you invoke a feeling, a mantra, a sensation, an aspect of being coming to this breathing in your abdomen, the diaphragmatic breathing, so that your quality of listening is balanced within mind and body. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Good to be back with you. I feel like now we're all one big family. We've been together for several weeks, and I feel like I know so many of you and want to thank you again for all of your wonderful questions, inquiry, everything that you are sharing, and taking the time to really develop your own inner awareness and buddhi, the intuitive capacity of your own being. So mythology, right? What does mythology have to do with the subtle body, right? It seems like they're two unrelated topics, but the mythology, when we hear stories, we really start to activate some aspect of ourselves that is very ancient, and a quality of listening that is very deep and profound within our hearts. So let's see what we have for today. I have a lot of nice photos today. I hope you enjoy, right? So today's topic is a lot of storytelling. And if you've been with me the last few weeks, you know that I like to tell stories. I didn't know I like to tell stories until I started teaching yoga. And then I realized that that's an aspect of the practice. That's an aspect of what we share to inspire ourselves and inspire others. But before we do that, I want to just go over a few reminders of this last week. Where did we stop from and where are we going towards, right? So we've made our way from the koshas, the vayus, the chakras, the bandhas, right? Now we're entering into the realm of mythology and the themes, the modes, the aspects of human nature that exist within us and that inform so many of the asanas that we do, right? And then next week we'll move towards pranayama and the importance of pranayama. And then finally to meditation and the mind, karma and dharma. So the span of mythology actually it spans the whole spectrum here, right? There are some stories taken from the Vedas, some stories taken from the itihasas. Itihasa means history, literally. So the itihasas are, you're familiar, the Mahabharata, which is the text that encompasses the Bhagavad Gita, right? The Krishna's teachings to Arjun. and also the Ramayana, and then various tantras and various traditions moving forward in the tantras, etc. So into Hatha Yoga as well. So we're going to be moving all over this timeline of yoga today. If you remember from last week, right, we talked about the bandhas. The bandhas are really the way in which we start to draw in the pranic capacity away from the dispersive aspect of prana and draw it into the central channel of the spine. And these mudras, right, were either pranic based or bhava based. And, when we talk about mythology, we're really in the realm of bhavana, our emotions, our mind, the way we feel when we listen to these stories, the way we feel when we practice the asanas, knowing the roots of where these asanas come from and why these asanas were created. What was the intention behind them? So that when you're practicing, when you're teaching, you bring within you, inside of you, this attitude, right? And the right attitude creates a system of yoga that makes your body what's called a yantra, an energetic machine, right? And once the body becomes a yantra, right, that flow of prana can really encompass all aspects of who you are, from physical to mental to emotional to spiritual, right? It becomes a holistic unit. So today is really about this bhava based, or these emotion based, right? What as I'm telling the stories, it's really, maybe you have a pen and paper, and you can really begin to feel like, oh, wow, what is coming up for me when I'm hearing certain stories? What emotions, what is drawing me, right, to these specific, aspects of mythology within the yoga tradition. And from last week, right, the bandhas and the granthis, this is again just a quick review how each of the bandhas start to act on different knots in the body. And as we untie these knots, right, we begin to wake up our potential. And today we are untying now, maybe perhaps some knots that are rooted deep in the heart, right? Some limitations within ourselves to move from our intellect to the heart-based wisdom, the devotional wisdom of yoga, or bhakti yoga. So I want to ask you, why mythology? What's the purpose, right? Why is it even important to study these stories or to know these stories? And, we can open up the chat box and you can just start to kind of contemplate and see why it is necessary, or why is it important to know these stories, and what is the purpose of myths for humanity? So go ahead, be curious to read your answers. Yeah, imagery, connecting to emotions, Gloria. Yeah, empathy. Very good, right? What else? Why else would mythology be something that we might want to go into? If there's anybody else. To keep our connection with our ancestors, Maureen, Shweta, to feel and understand yoga, Leslie, symbolism and the natural world, Gloria, wisdom, foundation, a place to begin, examples for better understanding, to learn from the knowledge of the past, perspective. Myths have meant falsehood for too long, and that is not the case. These myths are truths, and they have been silenced, but hold truth. Connect us to generations across space and time. Wonderful. To explain the unexplainable. Wow. Myths as a connecting element between people. Wow, wonderful. Stories to tell us about our heritage. On a large scale, to understand the commonality of human experience throughout the world. Wow, wonderful. A teaching tool, a quick way of passing information, community, universal symbols and stories. I don't even know if I need to go on. I think you guys got it all. I mean, you have it, right? Thank you so much for your very inspiring, your words. They're really, really beautiful to read them. I'm already feeling my excitement from reading all of these stories. Wonderful. So yeah, all of the above and more, right? All of the above and more. One of my favorite quotes about mythology comes from Joseph Campbell, and he says, "Dreams are private myths. Myths are public dreams." Right? Dreams are private myths. When we go to sleep in the night and we are in the dream state, right? Those myths that come up, the themes that come up when we sleep, are indicative of our own personal journeys, right? And myths are public dreams. That means myths are in the domain of all humanity. And many of you had mentioned, right? Connecting to our ancestors, linking time and space, understanding the commonality of the human experience. And this public realm that myths really are part of. So it's not that, these are Indian myths, right? Of course, they come from a tradition, but anger is not Indian or Western, right? And our desires are not rooted to past or future. There's no future fear or past fear, right? Fear is fear. It's all related to the human experience across time and space. These stories help to inspire us and to realize that, for me especially, what really gets me excited about mythology is that, when we read the stories of these wonderful, let's say, saints or sages, or stories of these amazing beings, it's always like the end point where they reached after the fact. With the mythology, we get to see the journey and get to see the commonality of our journey, right? That all beings struggle to know thyself, right? All beings have a starting point from which is always suffering, right? Why is it that we come to yoga? It is some form of suffering, most likely, that shakes us out of our daydream of normal day-to-day life, this mundane life, and activates this deep desire, the first desire within ourselves, which is this concept of our self-realization, knowing ourselves deeply. So the first myth I think would be so appropriate is the myth of Patanjali. Patanjali, of course, you all know Patanjali as the codifier of our Yoga Sutras. Oops, did I just go off? As the codifier of the Yoga Sutras, but sorry, can you all see me still? For some reason, I can't see myself.
Yeah, your camera's turned off.
Okay, sorry about that. 1 second. It just did it on its own. I think the weird.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah. I think the focus should be the pictures and not me today. Good. All right, there we go. So Patanjali is the codifier of the Yoga Sutras, of course. And there's a wonderful story about him and why he came to be known as Patanjali. So if you know of the trinity of the Vishnu, Brahma, and Mahesh, or Shiva. This is the aspects of creation, of destruction, and of sustenance, right? And Vishnu, the energy of sustenance, right, is said to lie on what's called Adishesha, or the cosmic serpent, right? And Vishnu is the one who dreams the dream of this universe, and this universe comes to be. And Shiva is the one who, through his cosmic dance, right, dissolves the universe for another universe to arise from Vishnu's deep nidra, or sleep, right? This is where the word nidra comes in, the yoga nidra of Vishnu. And one day, it so happened that Vishnu was observing this dance of Shiva, this cosmic tandav of Shiva. And he was so excited, so enthralled by it, that he started to get heavier and heavier and heavier on this couch of Adishesha, or this cosmic serpent. And Adishesha was wondering, what is going on here? Usually Vishnu is light as a feather, this is no problem. So he asked Vishnu, what is it that made you so rooted so deep within your body that the weight of your own body, you started to grow so big, so large that you weighed me down. And he explained, oh, watching Shiva's Tandav, watching the dance of the Adi Yogi, the first yogi, it filled me with so much bliss, right? And Adishesha had this deep desire. Oh, I wish that one day I could do that for you, right? That I could share the teaching so much that you would be so filled with that love and dedication and devotion to the teaching themselves, that I could be that, an incarnate of that. And at that same time, there was a yogini, a female yoga practitioner named Gonika. And she was very accomplished in yoga, right? In the mudra, in the meditation, high level practitioner. And she was folding her hands in Anjali Mudra and praying for a son. And Vishnu, allowed this Adishesha to descend down and be born as Patanjali. Pata is like a leaf falling from the sky, and Anjali is the act of prayer. So this act of prayer for the world, for humanity to receive the teachings of yoga, this is Patanjali incarnate. And this is why in so many depictions of Patanjali in India, you see him as half serpent, half man, because his true form is this cosmic serpent or Adishesha, also related to the Shesh Naga, the serpent at the base of our spine, known as Kundalini, the potential that arises when we awaken the Shakti or the power of yoga itself. And when we read the Yoga Sutras, that's what happens. Within each sutra is the seed of potential that is awakened, right, through our study. So Patanjali is that initial awakening, the initial, when we read that first sutra, Atha Yog Anushasanam, right? When we read that first sutra to begin, right? And to begin again and to begin again, our practice, our discipline of yoga. And Patanjali, right, is really that prayer that was answered for all of humanity to give and share and spread the teachings of yoga, so much so that they are still present and still such a source text for us, in the yoga community. Another wonderful practice is, of course, Surya Namaskara, or also known as Danda Samarpanam. Danda Samarpanam is the act of prostration, right? Samarpanam is to give yourself completely. Danda is from Dandasana, the staff position. So in many texts, there are lots of references, right, to the aspect of these dandas, or these qualities of holding the body in prostration to the sun. And here we have the wonderful Srivatsa Ramaswamy, showing that full prostration, the act of full prostration. Now, the modern Surya Namaskara that we practice is a bit different, but the quality is always this deep aspect of honoring the Surya Devata, or the sun god, right? So why the sun, right? The sun is immutable, unchangeable, permanent in its light, right? So the sun represents our Atman, or the soul, the depth within that isn't covered by our kleshas, isn't covered by everything that we accumulate either in this lifetime, or if you believe in other lifetimes as well, right? It is what is present within us and what we connect to. Each individual, when we practice yoga, you can find that there is some connection to that inner sun, that inner light. So by prostrating to that outer sun, to that outer light, we are then acknowledging our own Atman. And now, there's a lot of practices, and people are also very drawn to the moon. And why the moon, right? The moon is changeable. is impermanent. The moon waxes and wanes. That means that the moon, right, does not have this sense of, stability in its form, in its shape, and does not have its own light. It's a reflection of the sun's solar light, right, cast through the moon, right, animating the moon. So the moon is representative of our own mind, the changing tides of our mind and our emotions. So this is why I feel a lot of people are drawn to the moon. There's a relatability, right, with the way we change as individuals and the way the moon changes as a being, right? And also the fact that the moon is brought to life with the light of the sun. So, what does that mean? How does that relate to what we are practicing in yoga, right? Through the light of the sun, through the light of prana, our mind becomes alive. Through the light of the sun, the moon, right, waxes and wanes. So the similarity of this body, right, being a storehouse of this pranic energy, of that original energy of the sun itself. So when we practice Surya Namaskar, right, if you really want to practice Surya Namaskar, not as a physical exercise, but as a practice of yoga, right, bringing into your mind, bringing into your heart the image of the sun and the qualities of the sun, facing even maybe the eastern direction, maybe even going outside, right, and taking a moment to fold the hands in this Anjali mudra towards the sun, right? And that's a way of bringing the living aspect of yoga into the practice of this danda samarpanam, right? And when you practice this prostration, lying on the ground, your arms extended overhead, your head down, all aspects of the front of your body means the active aspect of your body with which you relate to the world is now flat against earth, and you are extending your palms towards Surya, right? It gives a very different feeling within yourself. The Surya Namaskara is related to a lot of these old Vedic and Namaskara mantras. I haven't written all the whole mantra for each of the positions, but there are 12, right? And therefore, these 12 mantras then became infused, right? With nyasa, you place the mantra within each of the postures that you do. The focus being to get down into the full danda samarpanam, to get down into the full act of surrender to the sun, full act of surrender to the Atman, the inner being within yourself that is unchanging, right? So the sun has different qualities. And when we practice Surya Namaskara, it's good to, we read these qualities, and whatever qualities resonate with you, the next time you practice Surya Namaskara, bringing forth the qualities of the sun that speak to your heart, and then practicing your Surya Namaskara, right? Om Mitraya Namaha. Salutations to the universal friend. Why the universal friend, right? The one who protects all, who gives life to all, who gives undiscriminatory, right? Who is always giving in all directions and doesn't say for you and not for you, right? Is a friend to all. Om Ravaya Namaha. The salutations to the one who shines, who's brilliant, right? Om Suryaya Namaha, to the one who induces activity. Why? We sleep, the sun rises, we wake up with the activity of the sun. There's an energy of the sun, there's an energy of the light, the daylight, that pushes us to activity, right? It's not that, the sun sets and then we get super active and we start doing everything. Maybe some of you do, who are a little bit more lunar, right? But the activity of the whole world, and you can see this in all the creatures, right? They wake up, the birds start at that first dawning light of the sun, and then they quiet down at the end of the day. Om Pushne Namaha, salutations to the giver of strength and nourishment, the one who supports us and nourishes all plants so that we can feed ourselves, right? And gives strength and ability when you go and you sunbathe, right? To feel the energy of the sun, the vitamin D, right? Coming into your body, right? And strengthening you, giving you that sense of energy. The prana is so strong from the sun, right? Om Hiranya Garbhaya Namaha, right, to the golden cosmic self. Garbha is like an egg, right? Or it's sometimes like it's said to be like a womb or a fetus, right? A collective, right, golden egg, right? Maybe you've read the what's the story of the golden goose, right? Who lays those golden eggs, and this golden collected form of prana. So in the center of the heart, there is that golden egg, Hiranya Garbhaya. Om Marichaya Namaha, right? To the bringer of dawn, the one who brings that first light, right? It's the one who is bringing that first step towards our own inner awakening, right? Om Adityaya Namaha. Salutations to the one who is the son of Aditi, the cosmic mother, right? So the relationship between Purusha and Prakriti, the male and the female, the mother principle who holds this universe, who supports us, and how Surya is one of her greatest, gifts to us as human beings. Om Arkaya Namaha. Salutations to I can't read that one. Can you read that for me, please? To the one who is fit to be praised, right? So the one who is giving of, who is fit for our praise, our devotion, because that is the one who is giver of life, giver of light. And Om Bhaskaraya Namaha, salutation to the one who leads to enlightenment, right? And that is the aspect of linking to our Atman. So the next time we do Surya Namaskara, maybe we can come to Surya Namaskara with this quality of the Danda Samarpanam. And we'll see if we have time to do that today. I'm not sure. Let's see how far we get. But take a look and really call forth in yourself, what are the aspects of the Surya, these 12 aspects of Surya? Which ones do I connect with? Which ones can I share next time I teach, next time I practice for myself about why we do Surya Namaskara? And to have that sense of the bhava, right? That the sense of the emotion, setting the emotional state, setting the mental state for you to then embark on the process of Surya Namaskara. So then your body, as you go through these dandas, your body becomes a yantra, an energetic machine for the flow of prana. Good. So now we have Bhagirathasana. So a lot of you know this as also Vrikshasana, right? Commonly in the more modern realm, Vrikshasana or Bhagirathasana, right? Bhagiratha, this is a story that comes from the origin story of the Ganga. So if you know, in India, there's a very holy river, the river Ganga or Ma Ganga, right? Ganga Mata, the mother, right? We call her. Where did she come from and how did she come to be? And it all starts with this king, Bhagiratha. So he at that time was the king in the northern Himalayan plains. And he, as he came into his kingship, he realized that he had inherited a lot of disrepair and disregard for the land, right? His ancestors didn't do a very good job of creating a prosperous nation. There was drought, there was famine, right? That there was a lack of order, right? The whole of society was suffering deeply. So to solve this problem, he decided to do tapas, right? And you all know this word, the austerity that we do of the disciplined practice of yoga. And the tapas that he took on was standing on one leg in Bhagirathasana, right? Or Vrikshasana, right? And with his arms extended overhead, he was standing, it said, for 1,000 years. Now, when we do Bhikshasana, maybe we'll stand for about 5 breaths or 6 breaths. We don't have to stand for 1,000 years, but it's the quality of this desire for nourishment, this desire to sustain and preserve all that is good in the land, all that is good in society, right? Not through actions of kingship, but through actions of tapasya, right? Of his own spiritual practice. And as he did this, he first did his tapasya to the goddess Ganga, who is the physical manifestation, right? This physical manifestation of the Ganga Nadi, the river of Ganga itself. So he did this tapasya, and she came to him and she said, you know, if I come down from the heavens as water, as this great mighty river, I'll destroy everything. It will be too much for this earth to bear my power. Better you go to Shiva and ask for a solution. So he continues his tapas, his austerities, his penance in Bhagirathasana. He never moves from this position. And he goes to Shiva, and Shiva agrees to let the Ganga river flow, the water, the goddess flow through his dreadlocks and then down into the land. So it's a beautiful story of how the Ganga River came to be and how through his penance, right, he was able to propitiate these energies of nature, right? Of course, we have the, human or more human looking manifestations, but it's all forces of nature that we pray to, that we are devoted to, that then help us to sustain, preserve, and protect ourselves and our environment. So these figures are from Mahabalipuram, which is a temple complex in South India, and from around, I think it's the 5th century BCE. So it's a beautiful, huge mosaic called the Descent of Ganga. And I went there, and I actually have a video, so I can show you. So you can see the whole relief of the story of the Ganga. And so that whole relief, very, very old, very, very ancient story, right? And coming down, right, as she comes down from the Himalayas, she comes and merges as two oceans. And this is a place in Devprayag. Devprayag is close to where I stay in the Himalayas. And it's the confluence of these two rivers, Bhagirathi and Alaknanda. And they form, if you can look, it's amazing, it's incredible, because they are literally two different colors, very clearly seen here, and they come together and they form in like the central channel, right? Ida, Pingala forming together, merging in this confluence to form the Ganga Nadi, the Shushumna Nadi, right? The Ganga River that then, feeds so much of the whole plain of northern India all the way to the east. So it's a physical manifestation of the story. It's an energetic manifestation when we practice the asana as well. Virabhadrasana. So a lot of you know this, the warrior, right? The warrior series, right? There are many Virabhadrasanas, 1, 2, 3. And a lot of people are saying, oh, there's no reference for Virabhadrasana. What is this pose that we take on with the bent knee and the straight back leg? The Virabhadra is a very ferocious aspect of Shiva, right? It's an aspect of Shiva that emerges from his third eye center, the Agya Chakra, and that aspect of Shiva that is the pure manifestation of this yogic energy, this yoga shakti. And if you look here, right, the one on the right-hand side, the statue is the relief, is the aspect of the quality of Virabhadra himself. Vira meaning energy, right? So when we practice the warrior series, there's a lot of enthusiasm that has to take place to hold the body in this position. And Bhadra means the most excellent pose, the most auspicious pose, right? And the one who is also a friend, right? The energetic quality that we befriend to have the enthusiasm to carry forth whatever action we need to in this world. On the left-hand side, we have Vajra Yogini. This is from the more the Mahayana Tibetan tradition. Vajra Yogini is a very fearsome goddess, right? And again, the same positioning of the legs, right? The legs signifying the energy or the quality of drawing energy from the earth and then extending out, right? The story behind Virabhadrasana is that if you know that Parvati is the wife of Shiva, so the male and female principle, and Parvati's father didn't like Shiva. She married Shiva without her father's approval. The father was a priest and was really into all these rituals and rites, and Shiva was a yogi. He preferred to be alone, to meditate, to contemplate, and to be within the practice of yoga, the experiential aspect of yoga. So they didn't get along very well. And so to insult Shiva when Parvati's father was having a ritual fire called a yagya, he didn't invite Shiva or his daughter for that fact. And Parvati got so annoyed, so upset that she went down and she tried to stop the whole ceremony by throwing herself into the fire as an act of defiance. And the fire devata, the Agni devata, the fire god, wouldn't burn her. He refused. So through her own energy in her navel center, right, the Surya in the navel, we talked about this in the chakras lecture, the Samana Vayu and the Manipura chakra, she set her whole being on fire. So she committed suicide. And when Shiva heard of this, he became furious. And from that fury was born Virabhadra, an aspect of Shiva that is the most energetic, the most destructive, right? And Virabhadra then carried Shiva to the fire offering where everyone was gathered. And, that act of carrying with energy, with enthusiasm, was this quality of Virabhadra himself. So, very ferocious, very fearful, to induce fear in the face of your enemies. And who are your enemies, right? These enemies are the things that when we close our eyes, the ones that make us feel limited, small, doubtful, fearful, insecure, right? That is what we need this energy to face. And that is what Virabhadra is giving us when we stand firmly on earth, right? And extend our arms out in that act of offering and bringing forth that energy of life itself. So the next time you do Virabhadrasana, right, you can really, it's like the enthusiastic effort of your own heart, right? So the way that you move your arms in the asana is not so tied to your shoulders, but literally to the enthusiastic effort of the Manipura chakra, the fire principle in the center of your body that rises up into the heart and from the heart extends out through the hands. Natarajasana, right? The Nataraj, from perhaps as the dancer pose, right? And the Nataraj is derived from the Indian dance tradition of Bharatnatyam, and specifically from this Leela, from this play or series of positions called the Tandav Leela. So if you remember from the story of Patanjali, when Vishnu was in awe watching Shiva's dance of destruction, dance of creation, the dance of life itself, that's called the Tandav Leela, the dance of Shiva. And the different positions are all aspects of this Tandav Leela. And it's beautiful if you ever have a chance to go and watch a performance of the Tandav Leela. It is very activating for your whole body, right? It really causes a rapid shift in your whole psyche to see the power, the ferocity, the gentleness as well in all of the positions of Shiva. So these are just two of the positions, but there are many, many positions that are in this Tandav Leela. Right? So when we take on this Nataraj, right, we again, the quality of the energy, the enthusiasm, the grace of bringing forth life, the grace of withdrawing life, the grace of knowing the balance in between, right? That is Shiva. And then I'm sure you all know, of course, the stories of Hanumanasana or Hanuman, right? Or Anjaneyasana, right? So on the ground when we come into our lunge, right? That lunge is seen in so many figures and so many reliefs of India, right? Of the position that Hanuman takes. And Hanuman is very interesting, the relationship to the subtle body, right? Because Hanuman is the son of Vayu. And if you remember, Vayu from the Pranavayus means wind, the air element. And it's the element that is located at the heart center. And Hanuman in the itihasas and the stories of the Ramayana is known for his deep, deep, deep devotion to Rama, who is an incarnation of Vishnu himself, right? And there's a story where Rama asks him how much he's devoted, right? And he literally rips open his own heart, and within it is not a beating heart, but Sita and Rama, right? Sita, his wife, and Rama, the incarnation of Vishnu himself, situated in the heart center, right? So when we practice these lunges, when we're practicing moving in this sequence, right, towards this full expression, this full split, there's a variety of qualities that we bring forth within our body, our pranic body, right? There's a story, if you see, when Hanuman is in this lunge position with his arms upraised, he's carrying in the top right hand corner, if you can see, he's carrying a little mountain, right? And that story is related to when Lakshman, who is the brother of Rama, he was hurt and got very, very sick. So Hanuman flew to the Himalayas to get this herb called Sanjeevani to bring back life to Lakshman. And instead of just picking the plant, he just took the whole mountain, right? And he took the whole mountain and he carried it back, right, and placed it at Rama's feet. So this idea of when we extend our arms, what we're carrying forth, what we're extending and holding is that energy of the life force, Sanjeevani, that the plant, right, the herb that gives us the strength, the enthusiasm, and that it has healing properties within ourselves, and to offer that at the feet of the divine. And then, of course, many of you know the story of Hanuman, jumping from the tip of India or Rameshwaram over to Sri Lanka, right, to take Sita back, right? Sita was kidnapped by Ravana. Ravana has a very interesting story. Ravana is said in the lore to be a demon, but he's really a yogi. And this is a very common theme in mythology, in Indian mythology at least. And I don't know if other mythologies too, but the boons, the quality of yoga is, again, non-discriminatory. It doesn't matter what you use the prana for, right? If you do the practice, you will receive the benefit, right? And Ravana was at that time one of the greatest yogis in all of the subcontinent and did lots of tapas, lots of penance to Shiva. And so through his penance, through his tapas, through his practice, he received many siddhis or many supernatural powers, right? But this is a crucial point for all of us as human beings who practice yoga, is just because we practice yoga doesn't mean that we bring it into a stream that is beneficial, right? The practice of yoga and then the intention of directing the pranic energy towards positive means, towards right thought, speech, and action, that's also a very important link for us. So you might be able to, feel the prana in your body, energize your body, but then it gets, in an explosive way diluted in bouts of anger, or all of these things that come out of, they feed the habit patterns within ourselves, right? So that's why the meditative aspects help to balance and bring a proper streamline, and not only the meditative aspects, but the framework that we create, the yama and the niyama, the ethical framework we create, help to channelize, right, our prana, so that we don't become like Ravana, but instead more like Vishnu himself, right? So as the story goes, Hanuman took this giant leap from India to Sri Lanka. And before he did that, he folded his hands and he said a prayer to his father, Vayu, the Lord of the Wind, because this was quite a far distance. And not only that, there were many obstacles along the way, many monsters in the sea who were trying to grab him and pull him down. So, I just took a workshop with my teacher, and we were in practicing Hanumanasana, and he said, say a prayer. And that's true. And, when you're in Hanumanasana, there is an aspect where we kind of have to say a prayer, because it's such an extreme pose, or otherwise known as Anjaneyasana, right? Such an extreme pose where every aspect of our body is utilized in holding the leap of faith, right? That leap of faith that we will reach the yonder shore, right? And that's really this quality of Hanuman that we bring into our when we're practicing Anjaneyasana, right? Which is, depending on which tradition you follow, sometimes Anjaneyasana is called the lunge, and sometimes it's called the full split, and vice versa with Hanumanasana. Matsyendrasana. Matsyendrasana, the sage Matsyendra's pose, right? Or as many of you know it, the Lord of the Fishes, right? And why the Lord of the Fishes? For some reason, Matsyendra, when he was a baby, his parents didn't want him, and they threw him into the sea. When they threw him into the sea, he was swallowed up by a giant fish. In some texts, it says it's a whale, right? Swallowed up by this great fish. And he lived in the center of the gut of this great fish. Now, where this fish lived, at the very bottom of the ocean, there was a cave. And in that cave would be Shiva and Shakti, Shiva and his consort, right? And in this cave, they would be talking about the teachings of yoga. Sometimes Shiva would ask Shakti about yoga. Sometimes Shakti would ask Shiva about yoga. And Matsyendra, in this body of this fish, would listen. He would ask the fish, hey, can you take me closer to this cave? And he would listen to all of the teachings between husband and wife, between masculine and feminine principles of this universe, not because they didn't know, but it was an act of this divine play of question and answer, right? To bring these teachings to life through Matsyendra himself. So he became so adept in the fish itself. He would practice the practices of yoga. He would practice the meditation, practice the asana that was being shared between these two beings. And finally, at the age of 16, he emerged as the greatest yogi that was born of this earth, right? Because of his direct, transmission of teachings from Shiva and Shakti. And so when we practice Ardha Matsyendrasana or Matsyendrasana, it's very, actually, I can say, one of the most challenging poses in yoga, because many of us practice the Ardha version, but if you practice the full version of Matsyendrasana, your one foot is in Padmasana, the other foot is across the thigh, and you're twisting the entire pelvic region and abdominal region, right? So there's an intense compression, right? Maybe signifying the compression of being in this fish, right? Practicing the poses to gain access to, right, that kundalini, or the energy in the base of the body. If you remember, to free the 5 sacral bones, and so that the prana can flow at the base of the spine. Matsyendra became a great master, and his first disciple or student was Gorakshanath. Goraksha, Goraksha, if you remember, go, if you know that word, is the word for cow, right? Gomukhasan, cow face pose. He was the first student of Matsyendra. And the story goes that he was born because his mother really deeply wanted a child, right? And so she prayed for this child. And Matsyendra came to her and he said, take this ash, right, and swallow it. And, after 9 months, you'll have a son. And he left, and she thought, this is ridiculous. So she throws this ash into a pile of cow dung and forgets all about it. And Matsyendra comes back 7 years later and he says, where is your son? He is supposed to be a great teacher of Hatha Yoga. He is the one who is going to start this lineage of Hatha Yoga. And she says, I didn't imbibe the ash. I threw it over there in that cow heap, the cow dung heap. So he goes over there and he looks and he pulls out this radiant boy known as Goraksha, right? And the father of the Natha Yoga tradition. And you can see here Pandit Rajmani Tigunayat nicely demonstrating Gorakshanath, right? A preparatory pose for Gorakshasana would be your Baddha Konasana, right? Your butterfly pose. And it requires an immense flexibility in your pelvic region, immense flexibility of your sacral bone. And Goraksha, given the name of this pose, given as a deep respect for the master, right? For who started this Natha Yoga tradition. So if you remember from last week, right, we talk about the Natha Yogis. They were these yogis who practiced the tapas and the discipline of yoga, right? Really to gain access to the principles of the base of Kundalini energy in the body by freeing up the sacral bone. And their practice was that by mastering one asana, you master all of the asanas. So instead of practicing many different asanas, they would take one asana and make it their point of focus for sometimes decades, right? And once they had mastered that asana, then all other asanas came under their mastery as well. So a lot of the poses that we practice, right, coming from this tradition of Gorakshanath, from his teacher, Matsyendranath, and from the original teacher, right, Shiva Adi Yogi, the first yogi. So this is kind of this mythological lineage that we can trace. And then we find it in the reliefs, in the carvings, in the dance, in the paintings all around us that we see in India as well. Another story is the story of Narasimha. Narasimha was the lion-faced man, right? And so you might know Simhasana, right? Sticking out the tongue, very fierce avatar of Vishnu himself. And again, this is a common theme where some yogi, some being, right, does an intense amount of tapas, intense amount of yogic austerities, gains the favor of either Shiva or Brahma, and becomes too drunk with their own power. And this was the case with this asura, or this being Hiranyakashipu. And he became, overwhelmingly powerful and was very destructive for the whole environment. But to his dismay, his son was a great devotee of Vishnu and not him, right? He didn't want to go down this road. And this is very common, like children don't follow what their parents want to do, right? And so Narasimha appeared to his son, Prahlad, to then, right, devour. Literally, he devoured his father by sticking out his tongue and ripping out his entrails, right? So when we practice this Narasimhasana or Simhasana, right, this quality of this ferocity that comes through. So many stories. I can't go into all the stories. There's so many stories and there's so many poses, but just giving you an idea of a few of them, so you get a sense. I won't go through all of them, but some other notable ones: Brahma Mudra, looking in all the directions, right? And remember, mudra is either an emotive state or an expressive state, right? To bring in this essence of Brahma, the creator, who looks and preserves and sees in all directions what's happening in this universe, right? So when we practice Brahma Mudra, we are doing the same. And then, many of these other poses, most familiar to you is Vashishtasana, Marichyasana. All of these are named after other sages and saints and yogis who are practicing, in the tradition of yoga. So when you have time, you are welcome to go over their stories as well. We unfortunately do not have so much time. So I just wanted to keep it short so you can get an idea of, like, some of the poses that we practice more frequently. How can we infuse them with the sense of pranic wisdom, right? But the last one is Shavasana. And I'll actually tell you the story when you're lying down in Shavasana so you can relax your mind a little bit and just let the story come to you. But this is a wonderful story about how Shiva became a Shava. Why did he become a corpse? And what is that corpse significant of in the yoga tradition? Why do we practice Shavasana? Other than, of course, the physiological benefits. Okay, right. I think let's stop there for now. I'm sure you have some questions, so we can see if there's any questions that I can help answer.
Yeah, so it looks like Avi and a lot of other participants over the past, 4 weeks have been asking about what books that you recommend for us to be able to read all of these amazing stories, and even
Yeah.
more about some of the concepts that you've discussed in your previous series parts. So what I think I might do is I'll circle back with you later, but maybe have you email us a reading list, and then we can include it in the chat, or on the recordings for the videos. So I'll just make a note of that, because it's just like, what book did you get that from, and can you go back to that slide and show us this? So everybody's very, very excited about that.
Yeah, I'll be
Um,
in maybe in the next or the last one, I'll oh, that was weird. I'll have a book list for you. So all my recommendations related to the Upanishads. But I have to say, the mythologies are spread across so many stories. So I have to find, I heard these stories growing up, so they're kind of in me. I have to find a good compilation for you. So let me do some research and find a good compilation for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Um, all of the stories were like told so beautifully, even in their summation. But Neil wants to know, you mentioned Vishnu and Shiva, but not Brahma. And I think you had mentioned Brahma. So Brahma is the creator, right? Can you talk a little bit more about those aspects of the Trinity?
Sure. So, the chant that I did in the beginning: Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara. Mahesh is another word or another name for Shiva, and this is a little bit confusing, right? It's like every goddess has so many different names. So just know that, right? So these three aspects of preservation, of creation, and of our the destruction, right? And the aspect of Brahma is creative force, the one that is creating this universe. Vishnu is he who preserves in his cosmic sleep, laying down on Adishesha. He seems like super chill guy, right? Relaxing, but he preserves because Vishnu is the only kind of manifestation that comes down in what's called an avatar, right? He comes down through Krishna, he comes down through Narasimha, different aspects of him come down to when the world has just gone totally nuts, when dharma is basically at its minimum. Vishnu wakes up from yoga nidra and says, okay, it's time for me to take action and come down and help the world get back on the right track, right? So Vishnu's role is that. And then Shiva, he's the one who is the, the father of yoga. If you read the Gyan Bhairav Tantra, I can write that in maybe I can write that in the chat box. It's all the different practices that Shiva speaks of. And as the father, you can say the father figure of yoga, along with the mother figure of yoga, which is his wife Shakti, they have these conversations, not for their benefit but for ours. By having these conversations, we get the knowledge, right? The conversations are documented, and we get the knowledge from their elucidations, right? And that aspect of Shiva is also related to that which must go, that which must be dissolved, right? The turning of this year was very clear of the dissolution quality. And now we are in the pause before that Brahma, the creative aspect, comes back to repair, to heal, to bring forth the sense of harmony once again.
Beautiful, beautiful. Avi, you also brought up your mention of Matsyendrasana, that described him as being the first yogi, and there are so many different versions. Where do the different traditions of mythology come from? And as a follow-up to his question, personally, I love that the story about him being swallowed by the fish, because it's so interesting how these concepts or these stories, this mythology is repeated in several different types of religion. As a Christian growing up, we know the story of Jonah and the whale. So that immediately stood out to me. Can you talk a little bit more about that story and how all of these different mythologies seem to kind of lead to the same lesson, so to speak?
It's so fantastic, isn't it, Sharon? It's amazing. And Avi, thank you for always asking so many nice questions.
Yeah.
So there's so, God, how to say, I'm just like, when I think about it, I become speechless because it's so beautiful. The quote that I mentioned of Joseph Campbell, he he is someone I would point to as the premier mythologist of all traditions, right? And what he does is he links together I can feel his heart in such a beautiful way, all of the mythologies and all of the similarities of these stories that erupt from human consciousness. And what that makes us realize is that humanity, the consciousness of humanity, is all interwoven, and that these origin stories, these creation stories, these dissolution stories, they come up again and again and again, linking across civilizations, across time and space, right? And the story of Matsyendra, the story of bringing forth the knowledge of yoga from the depths of the cosmic sea, right? So it wasn't that Shiva and Parvati were up in the heavenly realm. They were deep down in the kunda, in the base of our spine, in the depths of the water, deep in the base of the spine. And there had to be some aspect of ourself to want to know, that aspect of ourself that wants to know, that wants to practice, that wants to continue, that wants to come to these series, right, is Matsyendra himself, the manifestation of the guru within ourselves, to go down to the depths, to learn and listen to the teachings, and then to bring it out into humanity.
Lovely. So it's a metaphor.
Always a metaphor.
Beautiful. Gorgeous,
Always
gorgeous.
a metaphor.
I can't think of a better way to explain that. Being swallowed by a massive fish.
Bhagavad Gita is a metaphor. If you each character of the Bhagavad Gita is a metaphor for different aspects of our mind, different aspects of our body. It's amazing when you go into the metaphoric language. Metaphoric language, I feel, is like a divine song, right? It brings us into the pranic realm directly. There's no intellectual filter that needs to be accessed, and this is why I'm going on, but this is why we love our grandparents' stories. Right? We don't ask them like, "Hey, grandma, where's the source for your story? What's the reference for that story?" We just sit there like with our fire and our chocolate, hot chocolate, and we just listen, right? And that quality of listening, the quality of wonder, awe, are also very important aspects of yoga and our practice as yoga practitioners.
Wonderful.
All right.
Yeah.
Maybe,
So
yeah, maybe one more. I can squeeze one more.
yeah, I'm looking for one. Most of it is like comments or just a lot of gratitude for just how you've outlined the course and how you're explaining and telling all of the stories and
Okay,
including all these details with this limited amount of time that we have. Like it's very amazing. It's amazing that you're doing this.
let me tell another
Um,
story then.
yeah, Roy said that the Campbell quote also reminded him of Jung's collective unconsciousness.
Yes, exactly.
So
See,
another connection, yeah.
guys are doing it yourself. Your mind, your neurons are firing like beep beep boop 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 all over the place. You know, when you hear stories, that's what happens. You make universal. It stories connect. They don't divide. Right? They create a sense of community and harmony within your ecosystem. And that's the beauty. And this is why I love mythology and I love prana and the subtle body. But before we run out of time, let me tell you the last story of how Shiva becomes a Shava. And you can always email me or your questions. A lot of you have been doing that anyways, and I'm very open to your questions and comments. So please email me or contact me. So go ahead and please lie down in Shavasana. It's going to feel real nice now just to rest your body, please. Right? In story time. So take a moment. You can just scan your body, please, from head to toes, toes to head, and just create a sense of opening in the joints of your body. Joints are representative of these pranastanas or places of prana. So feeling a relaxation in the centers of your joints, getting in contact with your breath. And then just let your consciousness reside in the cave of the heart, Anahata Chakra. So this story starts with an asura or this demonic force, you can say, called Rakta Bija. Rakta Bija literally means, Bija means seed, right? Like Bija mantra, Bija, and Rakta means blood, seeds of blood. That is his name. And here he was, another being that did intense tapasya, intense yogic practices, and received a boon from Brahma because Brahma was so pleased. Right? He was a great devotee of Brahma. Brahma was so pleased with him that Raktabija said he would like never to be killed. So Brahma addended that request and said, every drop, if you are killed, if you are tried, if someone tries to kill you, whatever drop of blood drops to the earth and touches the earth, from that drop will arise another Raktabija. So you can never be annihilated. So with his craze of power, right, and greed, he started to destroy everything. He started to wreak havoc in all the villages, started to even wreak havoc in the Deva plane, in the plane of the deities. No one could stop him. All of the deities tried, but whenever they chopped him or cut him, okay, blood would come out, and every time the blood would touch the ground, 1,000 other Rakta Bijas would emerge. So they were befuddled, like, oh my God, what do we do? So they knew there was one goddess, Durga, right? The goddess who sits upon the great lion, the great solar lion. And they went to her and asked her, Durga, please help us. We do not know what to do. So just like Shiva manifested Virabhadra, Durga manifested Kali. Right? And you've seen images of Kali, black or dark blue, wild, ferocious, right? With that bright red tongue sticking out. So Kali comes into the battlefield. And she approaches Raktabija. And instead of trying to kill him with weapons, she proceeds to devour him one by one. Anytime a drop of blood would try to fall, she would lap it up. So slowly, she took Raktabija, all of the seeds of blood, of the seeds of his potential to arise, she took him into her body until there was no more Raktabija. But through this act of taking him in, she also became so crazed, right? So much energy within her own body. She lost sense of her own self, her own actions. And she started to then go mad. She started to destroy everything in sight herself. And she couldn't be stopped. And the gods came to Durga and they were like, oh my God, what do we do? Now we have another problem. Here's Kali, the energy of Shakti herself, the power herself manifest. Now this power is being unleashed and is destroying everything in sight. So they go to Shiva, her husband, and they propitiate Shiva and they said, please, Shiva, will you come and help us? There are bodies everywhere. There's destruction everywhere. That power is unbridled. We're not able to stop Kali in her frenzy. So Shiva considers for a moment and he says, okay, I will help you. And he comes down from Kailash, his mountain kingdom in the Himalaya, comes down and sees his wife, right? Another name, Kali, and decides that instead of meeting power with power, he will lie down and pretend that he is dead, a corpse. And Kali comes closer and closer and closer, right? Annihilating everything in sight, closer and closer and closer. And just as she is about to place her foot on Shiva and destroy him, she looks down and sees him. And she comes back to her own consciousness, comes back to who she is and what she is about to do to kill her own husband. And from that act, she sticks out her tongue, right? In India, when we are sorry about something, we stick out our tongue, and her tongue comes out in an act of recognition, of coming back to consciousness. So this Shavasana is this act of coming back to this deep sleep state, awakened. That the energy that we gain from yoga is not by itself enough. The balance is needed. And sometimes to meet that which is aggressive, we need to meet it with its opposite. Good. Go ahead now, please start to wake up, wake up your body. Start to stretch and move. Wake up with the sense of awakening, the energy, right? So when you wake up from Shavasana, really stretch and open your body, right? Come up with a sense of Vira, energy, enthusiasm. You can roll up to sit, roll to the side, and then press up to sit. So you can see how you can begin to tell stories in your classes. You can tell stories in these intermediate places. You can bring the qualities of the poses, the qualities of the mythology into to enliven, to inspire, and to create a sense of unity and connection between you and the other. Dhanyavad, thank you so much. Good.
Thank you so much, Kushi. Thank you very, very much for this amazing installment to your series. I'm sure this one will probably be heavily revisited on our sister site, yourya.org. And we'll see if we can get that list out next week of great books and texts to reference from your conversations. I do want to let some of our participants know I've answered a few questions in the Q&A. Please take a quick moment to see those answers before we sign off. And I will just say namaste. Namaste. Have a beautiful weekend.
Bye, everyone. See you next week. Bye-bye. Namaste.